that saved a wretch like me.
The woman singing that rendition of Amazing Grace is Fort Wayne area resident Erika Monroe. When she was only 10 years old, she was raped. 27 years later, the rapist was sentenced. Tonight, Erika courageously tells her story of how a cold case, almost 3 decades old, finally came full circle.
Community, commitment, coverage you can count on. This is Focus 15 on Wayne TV. Here's your host, Terra Brantley.
1 month ago, News Channel 15 was the first news source to bring you an exclusive interview with Erika Monroe, the victim in an Indiana cold case involving rape. She was abducted from her home in Elkhart County when she was only 10 years old. 27 years later, the rapist, Robert Quinn, who was already in prison for violating his parole for a 2005 child molestation, was sentenced to 53 years in prison. The circumstances surrounding this cold case were so compelling, so multi-layered, that we felt Erika's story needed more time than a regular newscast could offer to thoroughly explain the events leading up to the rapist being brought to justice. Erika's nightmare began the night of March 5th, 1988. Her parents had gone out for the evening. She and her 13-year-old brother were home alone watching television. We do want to warn you, some of what you're about to hear may be disturbing.
It started getting late. We were watching TV. We were watching, there was this fantastic show that had Mr. Miyagi on it. I thought it was fantastic. I was 10. What do I know? And I stayed up just to watch that, but my brother was tired, so he went to bed. I fell asleep on the couch. I only watched a few minutes of the show that I remember before I fell asleep. And I had covered myself with my Afghan. We had an Afghan on the back of our couch. And I woke up a few minutes later, and I was being carried out the door. I heard a loud noise, and I didn't even know at that point that it was a man that was carrying me out the door. It was just, I woke up, and I'm tucked under somebody's arm, being carried out the front door.
Did you see who the person was?
No. As soon as he grabbed me, he threw his coat over my head. And I remember the one thought, you have strange thoughts at weird times. As he was taking me out the door, the Afghan stuck on the door handle. And I remember thinking, I hope that doesn't get dirty. Mom's going to kill me. And he carried me out around the front of my house, behind a building that was at that time in front of our house, to the right side of the building. We got into his car. It had a bench seat in the front, and he put me in a headlock, and that's how we took off. We drove for, I don't know how long. At some point, we stopped, and I didn't know what rape was. We didn't talk about sex in our family. But then again, I was only 10, you know, and my parents' never really talked to them about that either. It wasn't a topic that a lot of people are comfortable with. Still today, nobody's really comfortable with that topic. We didn't talk about it. I didn't understand what rape was. All I knew was that this strange man was hurting me in places I have never been hurt before. He had me from a little after 11 in the evening until around 3 in the morning. He, thankfully, I think God insulates us, because I only remember 15 to 20 minutes of the 4 hours that he had me. And the 15 to 20 minutes is more than enough memory. I don't know that I want the rest back. You know, I tried to take the coat off because I wanted to know what was going on. I was screaming, I was crying. I pulled the coat down, and he just hauled off and punched me in the mouth. He told me to shut up, and that if I told anybody, if I didn't stop crying, or if I told anybody, that he would come and kill my parents and then me. He told me he had a knife. And he continued to hurt me. One of the things that I remember more than probably I wish I did was we had switched spots to where he was on the passenger side, and he had me laid out across the front of the bench. And I just kept gripping a hold of that steering wheel like it was my lifeline. And I kept pulling myself away, you know, and he would just pull me back. And it went on forever. He did luckily bring me back. So now we progressed from March 5th to March 6th, because it's Sunday morning early, around 3 in the morning. And he dropped me off about a block away from my house. And luckily it was a warmer spring. I was barefoot. I still had my nightgown on. He never took it off. He just pushed it up. And he allowed me to look for my panties. And I wouldn't get out of the car because I was bound and determined to find those. I wasn't going to leave any part of me in that car for him to keep. He took enough. So instead of making a run for it and opening the door, I sat there and looked and looked and looked until I found them, and they were jammed in the crevice of the seat. And I took them with me, and I got out, and I walked away, and I got about halfway between the car and my house, and I turned around, and I looked back over my shoulder, and I saw him staring at me, and it was the only time I ever really got to see him. And it was still dark. You know, you could see his build, his hair, which looked crazy, was backlit by a street lamp that was on the corner of my street. And I walked back into my house, and you know what's weird is I don't remember thinking, I need to run, I need to go lock the door, which would have been pointless. I mean, he broke the door, the lock was gone. I walked back into my room. I tried to clean myself up. I tried to use the bathroom. I knew something really bad had happened because it hurt so bad to try and go. I couldn't. So I just sat back down on my bed. And I wasn't home more than 2 or 3 minutes before my parents got there. I mean, it was so fast, I almost think they had to have passed him when they drove by. That fast. I could hear them talking when they came in the door. And they knew something was wrong. They saw the door. My mom came in my room and she said, "Erika, are you okay?" And yeah, Mom, I'm fine. Are you sure? I think I started my period. And she yelled at my dad to call 911. I begged them not to have an ambulance come. I didn't want my neighbors to know. So they sent a police car. And the police officer was kind enough to take me to the hospital in the car. I got to sit in the front seat.
Once Erika arrived at the hospital, she met with a counselor and authorities began their investigation. She continues her story when we come back.
Focus 15 continues. Now let's get back to your host, Terra Brantley.
After Erika Monroe's abduction and assault, authorities began investigating the case. Erika was brought here to Elkhart General Hospital and began the long road to emotional and physical recovery.
And there were 3 doctors that came in, and they had to use a speculum to take the rape kit to see how much damage had been done. That was agony. That was traumatic.
In the kit, you have your general instructions.
To learn more about the kit and victim counseling, we talked with Angela Mellon, a clinical nurse at the Fort Wayne Sexual Assault Treatment Center.
A sexual assault kit has many different components to it. There is the victim's blood sample, and that's for their DNA. There's oral swabs, there's genitalia swabs, external, internal, vaginal, cervical, anal. There's a victim's advocate that is solely there for the patient. So they're there to provide support and answer any questions that the patient may have. And then the forensic nurse.
Mellon says the process has come a long way since Erika was tested 27 years ago.
Forensic science has advanced so much in those decades. So as far as, I can't speak for 1988, but for now, we've come so far, and the kits are processed by the Indiana State Police Post, and we have great results from those kits.
After Erika was examined at Elkhart General and samples from her kit were sealed, she then had to have surgery.
I had to have a lot of stitches. I remember the doctor explaining to me that it was the first time in my life I ever had stitches. I remember that he said, "Don't worry, the stitches will dissolve." They told me to count back from 100. I remember getting to 99 and I was out. And I stayed in the hospital from that Sunday until Wednesday or Thursday. They came and interviewed me while I was in the hospital twice. And then every week for months afterwards, I had to go to the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department, that was in Goshen, and meet with a detective and go over the story every week for months. They tried to do a sketch artist rendering, but I didn't know who it was.
Since Erika couldn't give a description of the suspect and authorities had very little to go on, the case grew cold. The years passed. Erika left Elkhart, got married, divorced, married again, and had 2 children. She was now 34 years old and feeling like a large chunk of her life was still in limbo. What was the catalyst that got you to thinking, let's see if I can find this person? What happened?
The catalyst was God. I went to my yearly appointment and my OB, she said, "Well, you have a lot of scarring down here. It must be from when you had your children." And I said, "Well, I had my children by C-section." And she just looked at me and she said, "Well, hon, then this is damage from when you were a child." And I said, can you tell me the extent of the damage? And she's like, "No, there's no way that I can see. I can just tell you some of the scar tissue that I see." She said, "But if you get a hold of the hospital, they should have your records." So that's what started this. I called Elkhart General Hospital. This was in September of 2011, 23 and a half years later. I got to the records department. They went to try and look it up, and she said, "Hon, after 23 and a half years, we expunge the records. We dispose of them." So I got to thinking about it. I called my aunt, who's a nurse, and I said, I waited too long. I can't get my medical records. I've wondered often throughout my life, what exactly had been done? How much had I been ripped open? How damaging actually was it? Physically, emotionally. But she said, "Why don't you call the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department? Because I bet in the criminal file, they'll have a copy of your medical history, your medical record of what happened."
But the records they found here at the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department were incomplete. However, an investigator who happened to remember the 1988 case did some checking, and he found the entire file was intact at the Indiana State Police Crime Lab in Indianapolis.
They found the medical file number fairly quickly. Now they had something to reference, so they had to try and find the evidence. And so now you had people that were volunteering their time at the crime lab and going through by hand all these files to try and see if they still had my evidence. They found it. I asked them, I said, if they have my DNA, could we run it through? I've heard they have this national registry of violent sexual offenders. Is there a chance that we could get a match by running the DNA? He said, we could. It's called CODIS.
CODIS is where someone's DNA, if they've been arrested for anything, their DNA is kept on file. And so then when DNA from someone else is collected, then if it's a match, then that proves the DNA match.
He's like, there's a chance. He's like, and DNA has come a long way. And I said, well, let's see what we can find.
And at this point, what Erika wanted to find was more than just a detailed analysis of her medical records. She wanted to find out who raped her. So she contacted Elkhart County Chief Deputy Prosecutor Vicki Becker to explore the possibilities of reopening the case. Hear what happened when Focus 15 continues.
Now here's more Focus 15 with your host, Terra Brantley.
So now that Erika Monroe's DNA medical file from the 1988 rape had resurfaced, she wondered about the possibilities of reopening the case. She spent time working with Elkhart County Chief Deputy Prosecutor Vicki Becker.
When we found out, hey, we've got some information, we can find the case reports, Erika's still interested, I contacted someone I knew at the laboratory and asked if they would put this on their list of, cases, cold cases, to see if they can find the evidence. And they took the time to go back through the vault, because none of this was computerized, and manually flipped through thousands of cards to find this case. They found it, they called me and said, "You're never going to believe this, but."
At this point, this is when I spoke to Vicki, and Vicki said, "Do you think we really have a shot at prosecuting? Isn't there a statute of limitations on rape?" And she said, "Because you were under 14 years of age, and because of the degree of violence that was inflicted upon you, there would be a Class A felony. And there's no statute of limitation on a Class A felony."
Unfortunately, the Sheriff's Department, because of the passage of time, had destroyed all physical evidence in their custody. However, the Indiana State Police, who had originally tested the serological material, had kept some of the samples and had preserved them, even though they didn't have policies and procedures that mandated it, and put it in their storage vault, and there it stayed for 20-some years.
July 3rd of 2012, Vicki received notification from the Indiana State Police Crime Lab in Indianapolis that they had a hit. She said, "We were able to create a DNA profile, and we ran it through CODIS, and we got a hit. I know who raped you."
The evidence pointed to this man, 52-year-old Robert Quinn. He was already serving time in Elkhart County for violating his parole on a 2005 child molestation. Turns out he had a long criminal history that dated back to 1993, involving drug possession, residential entry, and molesting a child.
Fortunately, Mr. Quinn was convicted and sent to the Department of Correction, because had he not been, his DNA profile would not have been in the database. We never would have known how it hooked up, and then we never could have even found the person to get a confirmatory sample from. So, I keep saying this, truly, it is a God moment. Everything that didn't have to happen the way that it did happened perfectly, so that all together, in the end, the pieces fit together.
To know who it was, there's nothing I ever expected to know. It was my own personal hell that I had lived through in my teens and my 20s. And it wasn't until I was an adult where I finally came to peace with it. March the 5th, 2013, they pressed charges. It was the 25th anniversary to the day. How could you not see God's hand in that?
I use her as a story now for my little child victims. I have a 5-year-old that will come in and I will tell them, "You know what, babe? You're going to be okay. I know a woman who, just like you, went through something like this, and now she's a mom, and she's a professional, and she's one of the strongest people I know."
Erika now uses that strength as she raises her own children. She'll wrap up her story after the break. Now at the age of 37, 27 years after being abducted and assaulted, Erika Monroe says she is relieved and feels at peace. The man who raped her, Robert Quinn, is serving 53 years in prison. Erika says the nightmare that began at her home in Elkhart on March 5th, 1988, is finally over. As a bank account executive who works from home, she now lives in the Fort Wayne area. This wife and mother of 2 says she finds refuge in her work, her faith, and her family.
I'm not ashamed to be called a victim, because that's what I was. If you would have asked me at 15, at 20, would I be at peace with this? Would I forgive God for allowing this to happen to me? I would have said absolutely not. But can I see the blessings now that I'm 37 years old and I have a 10-year-old daughter who is amazing, and a 7-year-old son who is amazing? I can see the blessings now, and I want to pay it forward. If I can help other people with this type of situation. I've reached out to some different treatment centers that deal with children and victims of rape and child abuse to see if I can help volunteer my time. If there's anything that I can do to help them, whether it's fundraising or speaking to their people, because I think that the word needs to get out there that there is hope. If you've had something like this happen to you, speak up. Let somebody know.
Did you ever get your medical record?
No. But I am going to meet with Vicki, and she's going to get that to me. And I finally get to see what it was, the extent of damage that was done. Although now, it's not so important to me.
So what began this quest, so to speak, is no longer important.
Right.
DNA and diligence put the lid on this cold case. Erika says faith binded them all together. As rare as it is to have a case like this come full circle, it is also rare to have a rape victim come forward and share her story. We want to thank Erika for having the courage to do so. One of her favorite songs is Amazing Grace. We leave you with a recording of her singing her own rendition and information to help victims of sexual assault. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound